The man who said that was Martin Luther King Jr. Wouldn't objective be nice right about now? And that's the angle. Joining me now is Carol Swain, former professor at Vanderbilt and Princeton Universities and author of Be the People. Carol, folks we see amassing on the streets of cities across the country tonight, they're learning this behavior and this social justice warrior game. Your thoughts tonight?
Yes, I remember a few years ago at the universities, they were teaching courses on protests, and that puzzled me because we think about the 1960s, there were many protests, but they actually geared up for this moment that's taking place today in America. And what's really troubling is that the Biden administration, they want to fund history and activism so that young people in the K through 12 category would become activists. And so instead of learning civics about their nation, how to be a good citizen, how to be patriotic, they are being taught how to disrupt. They're not being taught to respect the rule of law, the institutions, the civilizing agencies that we've had in this nation. They are just being taught to disrupt. They're not being taught at all. They're being indoctrinated because when you teach someone, you expose them to opposing views.
This is what MSNBC reported today, Professor, about a group of activist educators who traveled to Minneapolis for the Chauvin trial.
This is a group called Principles for Good Trouble. They feel, as educators, they have a role to play in educating the younger generation. They are actively teaching students about the trial and what's going on. There's concerted efforts to try and make sure that Black and brown students within their schools feel like they belong, that their lives are valued. They'll be joining protesters later on tonight.
Carol, these educators, they're literally just agitators at this point.
And I can tell you again that Black Lives Matter, at least 3 or 4 years ago, in some of the public schools, they were taking children on field trips to protest and not always informing the parents. And so education is not taking place in America. And many of our most elite colleges and universities, they're only centers of indoctrination, and the wild ideas that they are pushing, they're taking it now to the K through 12, and it's very important for parents to push back. And when it comes to critical race theory, we all have a stake in ending racism. It is a racist theory, and I think that racial and ethnic minorities need to join hands with white Americans the same way we joined hands during the civil rights movement to push back and end what's taking place.
Carol, the parents at this Langley High School in Virginia, they reached out to me because I had done this segment on Friday night, and they shared with me that survey, the series of questions that the kids were asked, written by the teachers. I don't know what they're going to do with the data they collect, but the parents weren't even aware of it, and they were not happy at all. And I think they're beginning to band together, and this principal, Ms. Greer, maybe she has good intentions, but you can't just say the whole country supports Black Lives Matter. What is she saying? I mean, it's just patently false.
Well, I mean, people would be shocked by the instructional material that's coming from diversity, equity, and inclusion trainers, and it's going all across the country, and it really is unacceptable. It totally runs against American traditions and values. I would argue civil rights, equal protection clause, and we need to stand up against it. And it's not a partisan issue. No. It's not something that really divides Democrats and Republicans. And people who love their children, who love America's children, we need to stand up. No child should be shamed or bullied or intimidated in the classroom.
Yeah, Carol, thank you so much. Good to see you tonight.